Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, everyone. I'm Jean-Sébastien Brock from IECP, the Institute for European Energy and Climate Policy. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to this webinar of the SocialWatt project. That's the first webinar of a series of 3 webinars that we organize this winter to discuss the upcoming developments in terms of energy efficiency to tackle energy poverty. And this first one will particularly focus on the possible changes brought by the recast of the Energy Efficiency Directive. You can see on this slide the agenda for today. As you can see, that's quite dense. So we will start right away with Veronika Jerikova from the European Commission. Will provide an overview of the proposal made by the Commission for the ED recast. Then Marion Santini from the Regulatory Assistance Project will provide an update about the position from the Council and the Parliament on the negotiation for the ED recast. Then you will have a quick overview of the project and focusing on the lessons learned from the SocialWatt energy efficiency schemes by Adriana Stavarakaki, who is the coordinator of SocialWatt. And along this webinar, we will have 3 panelists who will provide us with their own experience on energy efficiency schemes to tackle energy poverty, including Ioana Giannulli from PPC, Javier Tobas from ECODES, so PPC from Greece, Javier Tobas from ECODES from Spain, and Sarah Koupchou from the Fondation BPA from France. And we will finish this webinar with looking a step even further with a presentation by my colleague Marco Peretto about other upcoming policies that are in discussions, like the possible extension of the ETS and what this policy could have as effects on low-income households. So as you see, that's a quite dense program. As usual, you can ask your questions in the chat. And we will take a round of short questions after each presentation, starting with the panelists and then every one of you. I hope you will enjoy this webinar. It is recorded, and now I will hand it over to Veronika Jerikova for the first presentation.
Thank you very much, Jean-Sébastien. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Veronika Jerikova, and I'm a policy officer at DG Ener. I work in the Energy Efficiency Unit in the team which is now negotiating the Energy Efficiency Directive recast with the Parliament and the Council. And I'm responsible for some of the provisions, including the provisions on energy poverty. And that's what I'm going to present today, the Commission proposal with the focus on the 2 articles, Article 8 and the new Article 22, which set requirements, new requirements regarding energy poverty. So we can move to the next slide. Just a short introduction of the context. Why do we include energy poverty requirements in an energy efficiency directive? Well, we have seen that energy efficiency has been identified as the most effective solution to alleviate energy poverty and to overcome some of the potential negative distributional impacts of pricing measures. We have seen it in the open public consultation on the ED recast when it was being prepared, also in the impact assessment, and they provided evidence that alleviation of energy poverty should be a priority action under the EED. Because when we look at energy poor households, they often live in poorly isolated houses. And that's why supporting energy poor households is highly efficient, because it helps them reduce their energy consumption and expenditure. And in addition, energy poor households are often at the back of the queue for energy efficient and sustainable technologies because of lack of financial resources. So this causes harm to their health because they are locked into burning fossil fuels like gas, or even left to burn wood or waste for heating. So the ED recast clearly addresses these aspects. The EED recast, as I'm sure you know, is part of the Fit for 55 package, which was presented in July 2021. And it provides the framework for energy efficiency improvement measures intended also to alleviate energy poverty. And the main articles, as I already said, are Article 8 and Article 22. So I will now go more in depth at what these articles actually propose. We can start with Article 8 and move to the next slide. So Article 8 is the current Article 7 because we've had an addition, so it now becomes Article 8, and it's the article which sets the energy savings obligation. So what we have is an increased annual savings obligation rate for member states. It is increased to 1.5%, and there is a special focus on alleviation of energy poverty. So we could say that there are three requirements. The first one is that policy measures, energy efficiency obligation schemes, alternative policy measures, or measures financed under Energy Efficiency National Fund should be implemented as a priority among vulnerable customers, people affected by energy poverty, and people living in social housing. So what we are asking member states is to make best possible use of public funding, including to consider to use the revenues from ETS allowances. There is also a requirement to ensure that national policy mixes have no adverse effect on vulnerable groups. And this is really important because we are asking member states to really look at the whole policy mix and ensure that it does not lead to negative effects on vulnerable groups. The second requirement is we are asking member states to promote the role of renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities, because these communities can help member states to achieve the EED objectives by advancing energy efficiency at local or even household level, because it allows customers to be empowered and engaged, and enables certain groups of households, including in rural and remote areas, to participate in energy efficiency projects. So we believe that energy communities should be promoted because they can help fight energy poverty through the facilitation of energy efficiency projects, reduce energy consumption and lower supply tariffs. So really ensuring that consumers are active. And the third requirement, we could move to the next slide. It is the requirement for member states to achieve the minimum share of the total amount of required end-use energy savings among those in need. So what we are asking here is for member states to identify the share of people who live in energy poverty. There's already an existing obligation under the governance regulation, and member states should have already notified the share of households living in energy poverty in member states. So if a member state has already indicated the proportion of these households in the NUCP, then the share of savings which should be achieved among people affected by energy poverty should be at least equal to that indicated proportion. Now, the novelty here is that we propose a fallback option. So if a member state has not notified this proportion or will not do so in the update of the NUCP, we are asking them to use the three indicators as a fallback option. So the three indicators to identify the share of population living in energy poverty is first, inability to keep a home adequately warm, second, arrears on utility bills, and third, share of disposable income which is spent on energy. And we are asking member states to take an arithmetic average of these proposed indicators. As I said, this is a fallback option, so we want to ensure that energy poverty is addressed across member states. But it's really important to stress that these indicators which are proposed do not limit member states in the choice of the policy measures or concrete groups of people that they wish to protect. So it's basically, it can be seen as a formula to calculate how many energy savings from the overall amount of energy savings required under Article 8 should be achieved among vulnerable customers and people affected by energy poverty. So this was Article 8. Now we can move to the new Article 22. There are some links, of course, between these two articles, but this article provides a general obligation for member states to take measures to empower and protect people affected by energy poverty. So what we are again asking member states is to identify those who are in need. And this provision refers to the concept of vulnerable customer, which is already well known to member states because it comes from the Electricity and Gas Directive. And the Article 22 sets an obligation for member states to implement energy efficiency improvement measures as a priority among vulnerable groups. So there is a similar provision in the Article 8, which I already mentioned, but this provision broadens the scope of the obligation because prioritizing energy efficiency measures does not refer only to policy measures implemented under the energy savings obligation, so in Article 8, but it applies also to other measures provided in other articles in the directive, for example, Article 21, which sets requirements about information and awareness raising. So this is much broader and is not limited only to measures under the energy savings obligation. There is more. This article also introduces concrete fields for action. So there is a list of elements. It's not exhaustive. It's not meant to limit member states. They can go further in the alleviation of energy poverty, but we provide, let's say, some elements for member states to consider. As I said, member states shall make the best possible use of public funding. They should implement energy efficiency improvement measures to mitigate those distributional effects from other policies. And in addition, we are also asking member states to carry out early and forward-looking investments into energy efficiency improvement measures. Last but not least, and as one of those measures to empower and protect vulnerable groups, we are asking member states to foster technical assistance. This is very important, and also enable funding and financial tools to be rolled out among these vulnerable groups of the population. There is also a provision on the establishment of networks of experts in this article. And the idea is to bring together experts from different sectors, from the health sector, from the building sector, from the social sectors, and to develop strategies to support local and national decision makers in implementing energy efficiency improvement measures aimed at alleviating energy poverty, and to generate long-term solutions which would help mitigate energy poverty, and also to develop appropriate technical assistance and financial tools. So this, in a nutshell, is the Article 22. And maybe just to conclude before taking any questions you might have, the just transition is an important aspect of the whole package, of the whole Fit for 55 package. And the proposal for the EED recast, together with the other initiatives in the field of energy and climate, it plays a crucial role in protecting the most vulnerable customers and people affected by energy poverty. I think you've heard the motto that we always say, which is that no one is left behind. So this is the rationale why we include these provisions also in the Energy Efficiency Directive recast proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. That was a very sharp summary and useful summary about the new provisions on energy poverty in the Commission's proposal for the EEG recast. This comes definitely. I mean, that the importance of that is quite clear, I think, these days with the high energy prices and the current energy crisis. So that there is a good momentum to go forward. On that, I don't see any question in the chat for the moment. I can follow up about the slide you presented about Article 22. That's very good that you presented this one, because the next webinar, in the next webinar that will be, and you can save the date in your agenda, that will be on Wednesday, 14th of December at 11 a.m. We will have the experience from 3 national observatories, so France, Italy, and Belgium, plus the presentation of the SocialWatt analyzer, and that's definitely some good examples of what can be done in terms of networks of experts and defining and monitoring indicators and collecting data on energy poverty, which is one of the new provisions in Article 22. So that's that follows nicely your presentation. I know you have to run for the activities related to the negotiation of the directive, so we definitely wish you good luck for that, and we thank you very much for opening this webinar. And we'll continue now with Marion Santini, who will present the position of the Council and the Parliament on this proposal. Marion, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you, Jean-Sébastien, for the introduction. Let me share my screen. Is it okay?
Yes, we can see it, but for the moment it's not full screen, but we can see your PowerPoint. Yes, indeed. Yeah, now it's full screen. Perfect.
So my name is Marion Santini. I'm with RAP, the Regulatory Assistance Project. We are an independent NGO working on policy innovation in the energy transition. And today I'm covering for my colleague Louise Sunderland, who's very sorry she couldn't be here. She's leading our work on equity at RAP, and she's been involved in the SocialWatt project. I'm going to talk about one specific aspect of what Veronica covered just now, which is the energy savings obligation. And I'm going to go through what legislators in the EU are currently discussing following the publication of the Commission proposal. Briefly looking at the current situation, the Energy Efficiency Directive has been a very important piece of legislation at EU level. With the energy savings obligation, which is now Article 7 of the directive and which will become Article 8 of the new directive once it is agreed, Member States shall deliver energy savings from national policy measures. And they can do that by putting in place an energy efficiency obligation scheme. This means that utilities are in charge of delivering the energy savings. They can also put in place other policy measures like subsidy schemes, for example, or voluntary agreements. And these are called alternative measures. And they can do a mix of both energy efficiency obligation schemes, EEOs, or alternative measures, as long as they reach the target they have, a certain amount of energy savings, which they should achieve over an obligation period. Now, since the last revision of the directive in 2018, there is some text on energy poverty in the directive. But the text only requires member states to take into account the need to alleviate energy poverty. There is no mandatory target of a number of energy savings which would have to be achieved among the energy poor segment of the population. So what's happening right now in practice is that only 2 energy efficiency obligation schemes have put a ring fence or a sub-target for energy poor populations. And in general, what we found with SocialWatt is that utilities find it hard to prioritize energy poor households if there is no sub-target to do so. As for alternative measures, there is not enough information to actually count how many savings are achieved by these measures, because the reporting does not require member states to differentiate the different type of beneficiaries of their policies. So the Commission proposal that Veronica presented would actually change that situation. It would introduce a sub-target, a mandatory target for member states to achieve a share of this energy savings among energy poor populations. It's still a very flexible obligation in that member states can decide what policy measures would best fit these target populations, and they can also decide which target groups they would go for. So now, what's quite interesting is that the co-legislators, which are in the EU, the European Parliament and the Council of the EU, they are now looking at the Energy Efficiency Directive text. So it's not only this provision, but it's the whole directive which is being revised. And for the time being, none of the institution has actually questioned the existence of the sub-target. They have tried to actually amend some of the provisions related to this sub-target. The Parliament is proposing a new calculation method for the ring fence for calculating the target that member states should achieve. It also suggests defining the target groups, extending the possible target groups. The Council also proposed to extend the target groups, and it proposes a new calculation method to capture savings among energy poor populations. So I will go briefly through these amendments now. So on the ring fence calculations, as Veronica explained, the target for each member state would be equal to the proportion of households in energy poverty as assessed in the National Energy and Climate Plan. Now, there is not enough information in the NECPs to actually calculate those targets for all member states. The Commission has anticipated this, and they proposed a backup method where you would use a number of indicators to calculate a target for each member state in case there is not enough information in the NECP. Now, the use of indicator that the Commission proposed comes with a number of methodological issues. And there is, in particular, there is one data set which is not very complete, or where you don't have enough information from member states to actually have a complete data series. So the Parliament is proposing an improvement of that methodology. This would also result in more savings being achieved at EU level. We have calculated that, so this is very much of a minimum threshold, because of course member states could go beyond that target, and some are already doing it. But with the Commission proposal, you would get a minimum of 6% coming from the segments of the population we're most interested in, and with the Parliament method, it would go to 10%. Again, that is a minimum, and we of course hope that more can be done in these target groups. So I'm not going into the details here, but the Parliament would delete the indicator C here and replace it by two indicators, CA and CB, where there is actually more data available from member states. Now there are also some amendments on target groups. So in blue here, you will see the groups that the Commission has listed as groups that member states can build on to define the population they want to target with this ring fence. The Parliament would add a group which is low-income households, whereas the Council would also add a group which is financially weak households. So they would not question the possible groups that the Commission has proposed, they would just add to that list, adding to the flexibility for member states to actually define a target group which work best in their context. Now going to the calculation method, the Council is proposing a new calculation method for energy savings targeting energy poverty alleviation. So the idea is that currently, if you realize saving in energy poor households, there is a lot of chance that the household was rationing energy before the intervention, and after the intervention there would be an improved comfort, so the amount of energy savings would be smaller than if you would have done the same intervention in another household. And therefore this methodology proposes to take a different baseline in order to make sure that the intervening in a household which is rationing energy is actually bringing energy savings that would make it worthwhile for the utility or for the member states to act in this population. And this discussion is actually already happening. So the Stream Safe project has been looking at methodologies on how to do that. So this would actually provide another reason to do more savings among these groups. Now, what do we expect now? So the negotiations are ongoing. There is a meeting scheduled next week where this will perhaps be discussed, and the discussions will continue until the end of this year, and perhaps afterwards, if this is not concluded, that we don't know yet. But what we can already expect is that once the new directive is in place, there will be additional scrutiny on the impact of energy efficiency policies on energy poverty. There might also be some discussion on target groups among member states. So in each member state, how do you define a target group? How do you make sure that your policy measures actually reach those target groups? And I think we can also reasonably expect that there would be new policy measures, or that the existing policy measures will be targeted in order to reach, in order for member states to achieve their new ring-fence targets. I will end my presentation here. So this is our website. You can find some of our publication on the Energy Efficiency Directive and other. And I pass the mic back to Jean-Sébastien. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion, for this good complement to Veronica's presentation. In the meantime, I added in the chat, you can find a few links, first where the slides of today will be available, and also the policy brief prepared together with the ENSMOVE project, and the workshop done also jointly with the ENSMOVE project on this topic. And Marion mentioned also the Stream Safe project, and there is a meeting on this topic of energy savings from energy efficiency measures tackling energy poverty that is planned on Friday, 9 December. You have also the link in the chat. So now we will get some views from our panelists on all these proposals included in the EG recast, and what the different EU institutions are considering. So maybe we will start with you, Anna Giannulli, and you can briefly introduce yourself as well. So what I will ask you, Joanna, to start is what are your views on the changes that have been presented by Veronica and Marion, and if you see opportunities or challenges in these changes from your point of view of energy utility.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Joanna Giannulli. I'm working with PPC, it's Public Power Corporation, it's the largest utility in Greece. We have almost 60% of the market, and I'm mentioning that because it's very important concerning the obligation schemes. In Greece, we have obligation schemes. My department is responsible for designing the plan for the schemes and measures that we implement to meet the target appointed to us. So all this discussion about the recast of EED is very important for us. I have to say that it was good, this 0.8, and now again, this 1.5 savings every year is something that give us a harder work. And to be honest, we believe that pushing this thing so hard at the end will not make changes, because what you can do is sometimes is predefined. There is a limit. So irrespectively of the targets, at the end, you cannot do anything else. I mean, you do your best anyway. So this is an issue, this continuously increasing target to be achieved. Of course, we were expecting that increasing the target, we will find they will introduce, let's say, more cost-effective ways of calculating savings, which is not the case up to now. It is not clear. Again, we have to meet such targets. We need a lot of technical measures. Technical measures cannot be reported the overall saving that we can achieve, since their lifetime usually is larger than the reporting period every time. So this is also a big issue. We fully support the ring fence introduced. However, we are very skeptical whether this should be part of the obligation schemes. Okay, we understand that alternative measures can address such a type of measures on energy poverty. It is not so, let's say, easy, fair if you are looking at it from the point of view of an energy supplier of a company. So another point that was not mentioned but is very important for us is that with this recast we stop supporting technologies that are based on fossil fuels, which is also very important, and for energy poverty. I mean, for the measures that should be implemented for energy poor households. And we are, let's say, we have a lot of expectations. No, we wish to have at the end, let's say, a positive result from this attempt is taking place at the moment to find a more cost-effective, let's say, way of calculating savings, because this is very important regarding implementing measures on energy poverty, considering the fact that usually energy poor households cannot invest at all, so you have to go for 100% investment covered by the utility or the member state. So at least you have to have something to calculate savings that will be, fair. For instance, take away the limits that we have on appliances and electromechanical systems from eco-design. Find, let's say, be more fair with the life cycle savings of measures, etc. So let's say more or less this is a reflection on what is taking place in this recast. Let's hope that at the end we'll have also some positive things and not just a higher target. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Fiona. I think that's very good to have your point of view, and also let's say the feedback from the stakeholders who have to implement the programs at the end. I guess we might have a different viewpoint now if we move to Sarah Kupchou from France, from the Fondation Abbé Pierre, which is an NGO. So Sarah, if you can briefly introduce yourself, and the same question. So how do you see these changes, challenges, or opportunities?
Thank you, Jean-Sébastien. So I'm Sarah Kupchou from Abbé Pierre Foundation, which is a private foundation in France, one of the biggest NGO on access to housing and struggles against housing exclusion in France for vulnerable people. So I will speak with two places, if I can say, because we are discussing with the government about all the energy poverty policies, and we are doing a lot of advocacy on that point. And in another way, we are also we have a program that is practical program with I don't know if I can say that in English, sorry. ES, we can say that, energy efficiency schemes. So my point of view is that in France we have a fifth period on EES from 2022 to 2025 now. We already have some targets on energy poverty and obligations to use these schemes to improve the situation of people in energy poverty. So the challenge for us, I think, will be maybe on the definition of energy poverty, because we have some discussion on that point in France. For example, ONPE, which is the National Observatory of Energy Poverty in France, has a number of 6.7 million persons touched by energy poverty. But for our point of view, ABP Foundation, this is more 12 million persons. So we can say that there is, with the use of different indicators, the number of persons who could be touched by that kind of policies can be really different from a point to another. And the other point will be what kind of action can be done with these schemes. Since 1 or 2 years, we can see that the government change, decrease, if I may say, the package on isolation or the change of the windows or things like that, but increase the package for heating system. And our point of view is that if we want to have real better efficiency, we cannot just change the heating system, and it's important to promote global works and renovation, really efficient renovation. So of course it gives it's question the way that we are calculating the savings, and we cannot say that just change the heating system, it will be efficient if you have a bad roof and bad windows. So we think that it's a point. And also the government removed bonus from for energy poverty households. So with the question of prices of EES that is decreasing from 30–40% since in 2021, sorry, it shows that if we make an assessment of the last 3 years, we can see that the most vulnerable people were really touched by the change of the French policies, and now we just have 60,000 global renovation in France, and we just have, even if MaPrimeRénov', for example, works, we just have little work, little changes in the buildings, and it was not enough to promote good energy efficiency at the end. So the challenge will be to be sure that we cover the most people, the most vulnerable people, with the definition that allow to touch everybody that is in need regarding the energy, and to promote global renovation and efficient renovation. And of course, I think that we can make the link with the discussion around the EPBD directive and the question of minimum standards of renovation, and we need to make the link between those two directives. I hope that it was clear. Thank you.
No, that's perfect. I think that's very clear, and you indeed raise a very important point about yes, the scope, the targeting, which actions are the most efficient to really change the situation for the households and so on. And I put in the chat some clarification about the French white certificate scheme.
Thank
Now
you.
thanks a lot, Sarah. We now move to Spain with Javier Tobas from ECODES. Same questions, your views on the changes, challenges and opportunities. The situation is a bit different in Spain as regard obligation scheme. So maybe you can say a few words on that.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for inviting us. As you said, I'm Javier Tobias. I'm the building renovation responsible at ECODES. We work for the right to energy, both from a practical and from a theoretical point of view. So we give energy advice. We carry out home renovations targeted at vulnerable households, and we also do some advocacy work regarding these issues. I think that our position is going to align very much with what Sarah stated. Maybe I can add some things regarding the objectives or how the ED is planning to ring fence budget or measures for vulnerable households or for people in energy poverty. We do think that ring fencing funding is necessary. We find out every day that people in vulnerable situations have many more problems to access incentives, to access aids than the rest of the population. So funding should be ring-fenced specifically for this population. And we also think that to progress as a whole, as the European Union, we need to harmonize our objectives, and we need to harmonize our parameters, because currently each member state with the current text is able to state their own definition for energy poverty, and we think that it should be at least a common framework, but that should also at the same time respond to territorial differences. For example, just in Spain, we have regarding EPCs, energy performance certificates, we have about 20 different climate zones, when at the European Union, when some sort of climate zones were being established, we were talking about 3 climate zones when the zero emissions building were proposed, for example. But on the other hand, just to go over this, how this energy poverty is measured, we think that currently we are carrying one of the problems that was started by the Energy Poverty Observatory, which is that one of the parameters is the inability to keep your house warm in winter, but we've never introduced the inability to keep your house cool enough during summer as another parameter that should be measured. And I think that it's going to be something that's going to be more and more necessary as time goes on. So we do need harmonized parameters, but we need parameters that respond to different territories. And just to build on what Sarah stated, we think that not all energy efficiency measures work the same, particularly when we're talking about vulnerable households. We have to focus not only on improving the energy efficiency, but also to build on that to improve the living conditions of people who are living in energy poverty, people who are in vulnerable situations, etc. And for example, from a theoretical point of view, you can reduce the final energy consumption of a home by improving the insulation of the walls, or by installing a heat pump, or improving the heating system. And theoretically, they will both reduce the energy consumption by the same rate. But if the household itself has no money to pay for heating or for cooling, then the insulation will still improve their living conditions, but the heating or cooling system that is better than the one they had before will not improve their living conditions in such a way as the other measure will do. Energy and Poverty research group here in Spain published their own indicators on energy poverty, and according to their calculations, hidden energy poverty in Spain would be in 2021 about 31.2% of the population, and severe hidden energy poverty would be around 10% of the whole population. That means households that are using half or 1/4 of the energy that they would need to live in appropriate conditions. So we think that it's very important to harmonize the parameters, to harmonize the objectives, and also to prioritize measures that can better improve the living conditions of people in energy poverty.
Thanks a lot, Javier. I think it was also very complementary to what Sarah said, and also with a different perspective. As in Spain, definitely the obligation scheme is different. You don't have a ring fence yet, and even that's rather a tax system for the moment, contributing to energy efficiency fund, and the actions tackling energy poverty are done with other schemes, and especially local schemes. And your point also on the difficulties for low-income households to access funding schemes where they are not restricted to them, and the fact that the other households might have might access to this funding more easily is also very, very important. Now we can move to what the project has done on this topic in developing energy efficiency schemes. And I'm happy to hand it over to Adriana, who will briefly introduce the project and the schemes that have been done. Adriana, the floor is yours.
Hi from me as well. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, perfect. That's in full screen.
Okay. So I'll briefly talk about SocialWatt, which is a project funded under Horizon 2020, and briefly cover some of the let's say lessons learned from the work we have been doing in designing and implementing energy efficiency and renewable energy schemes, challenges faced, and lessons learned more focused and relevant for future, let's say, energy efficiency obligation schemes due to the focus of this webinar. But in subsequent webinars, we'll cover more lessons learned, key findings that are more related in the design and implementation of schemes, and we'll communicate it with in different ways. So SocialWatt, SocialWatt main aim is to enable utilities, energy suppliers, and energy service companies across Europe to develop, implement, and replicate innovative schemes to alleviate energy poverty. In this slide, you can see some of the specific objectives of the project, which include identifying energy poor households. So we worked on understanding the different energy poverty definitions across Europe and the indicators, the data that's available to use to identify energy poor households. And we've developed also a decision support tool, SocialWatt Analyzer, that utilities and energy companies can use to identify energy poor within their customer database based on 6 indicators incorporated in the tool. The second key objective of the project was to develop schemes to alleviate energy poverty, so energy efficiency or renewable energy schemes. And the 7 energy companies and utilities participating in the project developed their energy poverty action plan, and are which includes at least 20 schemes in 7 European countries: Greece, Croatia, Latvia, Romania, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. And that schemes basically that aim to alleviate energy poverty. The third key objective of the project is to actually implement the schemes selected and evaluate their effectiveness. And through this process, we have a lot of key findings and lessons learned and recommendations as well. Finally, we have a couple of more objectives which relate to building the capacity of utilities, energy companies, social services, and replicating the outputs and the results of the project across Europe to other utilities, and also formulating policy recommendations for policymakers. These are 3 examples from the schemes that have been developed. As I mentioned, we've developed more than 20 schemes across Europe. And actually, the common denominator of all these schemes is that in most of these schemes, partnerships have been formed to better design and implement them. So, for example, many of the schemes rely on the collaboration of local authorities or of social services in order basically to better engage with energy poor households and target them. Other schemes rely on the collaboration with technology providers or appliance retailers to be able to offer more attractive, let's say, schemes to energy poor households and help their uptake. We faced a number of challenges in the last few years, and one of them, as initially, like in this webinar, it was mentioned, the definition of energy poverty. But what we found out that it doesn't necessarily have to be a barrier, and utilities and energy companies chose alternative ways to basically target energy poor households by using, for example, vulnerable customers as a proxy, because these are well identified within their database. Use the results from the SocialWatt Analyzer tool that I mentioned previously, or use people that are supported basically by social services and local authorities, which are in need for help. Another key challenge that we faced is many utilities, many energy companies found it very hard to develop a convincing business case internally to invest in energy poor households, especially when these are not cost effective when compared to other options. As Joanna mentioned as well, this is particularly true within the EU energy efficiency obligation schemes, where technical measures are also not so cost effective, and adding to that, energy measures basically for energy poor households are even less cost effective because of the need to cover the full cost of implementation for them. So another challenge was to secure finance to support these energy poor households, especially when high investments per household were required. And of course, engaging with energy poor households that, as I mentioned before, many partners chose to work with social services and local authorities to be able to better reach and engage with these households and try and build trust, which was very important for them to participate in the schemes that were designed. Finally, there were quite a lot of technical complexities in designing and setting up schemes, but also different unforeseen events the last few years that have hindered our efforts, and we have overcome. So I'm going to move on to some of the key findings, and I'll focus more on the key findings which are relevant for future energy efficiency obligation schemes. As Marian, I think, mentioned earlier, without a firm obligation, utilities really do find hard to prioritize energy savings for energy poor households. And as I mentioned, especially since these schemes are more costly to deliver than other sectors under any energy efficiency obligation scheme. In addition, policy stability is needed, given the length of time needed to set up partnerships and finance mechanisms to deliver support for energy poor households. And in some cases, the 3-year cycle of an energy efficiency obligation scheme is a bit disruptive, and especially when there are delays in the launch of the new energy efficiency obligation scheme, and hinders the development of good and sound energy poverty and general energy efficiency schemes under the obligation scheme. Another important conclusion from the project is that alleviating energy poverty through an energy efficiency obligation scheme alone is not sufficient. Many utilities prefer to develop schemes that are either low cost or single measures. So it really doesn't help in offering energy poor a complete renovation package, something that will radically basically change the efficiency of their dwellings and help them improve their living conditions and escape energy poverty. Working with other partners, with partnerships like with social services and local authorities, can help develop schemes that are more towards a deep renovation to help and alleviate energy poverty, as well as a general shift towards deep renovation in national legislation. So we've seen recently in Ireland, how the energy efficiency obligation scheme is now requiring utilities and energy companies to reach performance standards for these energy savings to be eligible, basically. Finally, As Johan also mentioned earlier today, energy poor households cannot really afford any schemes, any interventions. Any cost for them is prohibiting in order to go ahead with improving their households and upgrading the energy efficiency of their dwellings. If schemes are not able to offer solutions to energy poor households that are at no cost for them, then combined financing or combined funding needs to be facilitated so that these costs are not prohibitive for energy poor households. So I think that's everything from me.
Thanks a lot, Adriana. And before I ask their opinions to our panelists and their views on that, and also to share their own experience with running schemes to tackle energy poverty, just a practical note. So initially, maybe when you registered, the webinar was planned until now, so until 1:30, and we decided to extend it by 15 minutes. Maybe now that will be even 20 minutes. I hope that's fine for all of you, and you find the discussion interesting. So stay with us. There is more to come. Thanks, Adriana, to share the experience from the SocialWatt schemes. Maybe we can start with Joanna, as you are also involved in SocialWatt, but maybe you can share also your experience with other programs that are developed by PPC, and so what's your take from that? The lessons you learned from that, and maybe the other question would be if you would do the programs again. Now, what would you do differently based on your own experience?
Okay, concerning energy poor households and technical measures, we have tried to implement twice a scheme. The first one was to support, let's say, revamping to almost 600 energy vulnerable households. This was an easy measure in the sense that we had the full cost provided, so we just, it was like free, and it worked. They like it. They support it. They facilitate the way that we distribute it, and there was a result. Since last April, we are also supporting the implementation of heat pumps. For the heating system and hot water. We are providing the full support for the technical study required to install a heat pump in a flat. We are giving 500 euros support, okay, in the final in the cost of the equipment. And also we had designed before this huge changes in energy prices. We had designed a product that supports the use of the heat pump, in the sense that it has a discount price after the 2,000 kilowatt hours. That actually the energy of the heat pump is coming into place. Okay, it doesn't work for energy poor households. Okay, the cost is high, even if you support them. Although we are supporting energy poor households, even if they have already another type of subsidy, just to support their part of the contribution to the investment. They don't. They are not support. They cannot afford it. They cannot be included in such a type of product. So for us, it is clear in the sense that if it is again to, let's say, either change a little bit this measure or design a new one, we have to find either an innovative way to finance it, so that we can get support also from the state, or support them to reach financing from banks. Okay, so to cover part of the cost. or be prepared from the very beginning that these are investments that we have to make 100% by the utility. So this is a big lesson learned. Another issue that we faced and we are going to face if it is to go, for more technical measures about address to energy for households is the fact that almost 40% of them are living in houses that they are renting. So there we have a very big issue to address, and we need a framework to split incentives, something that cannot be made by the utility. I mean, it's something that the ministry has to take care. Actually, they are very reluctant in doing things because they are afraid that by increasing the value of the dwelling, they will be faced with the need to leave the house because the owners would like to ask for a higher rent or make a refurbishment more complete and change the value of their premises. So these are two very important things that we have to consider how we are going to address financing as smart and innovative as possible, and design very fast a way to deal with people that they are not live in their own houses. This is a big issue, and here is where my previous comment comes about eco design. The only thing that you can do to these people is support them with their appliances or lighting. But again, appliances, we have the eco design, and although you are, replace very old appliances, what you get back is limited for savings. So again, this is a big issue that we have to address. So yes, everything is good. We have to support energy poverty, but we have to facilitate somehow those that they have to undertake this task.
Thanks a lot, Jana. Well, about your last point about counting savings from refrigerators, let's say appliances or lighting. Mm-hmm. In the ED and Article 7 and Annex 5, you have actually an option which is about earlier replacement. So if you can, as you said, that's probably the case for most low-income households, that when you do a program, you will replace either the light bulbs or the appliance much earlier than what they would have done themselves. So in that case, that can fall in the category of earlier replacement, and in that case, you can count the savings as before, after comparison.
Yeah, but the truth is that in the majority of cases, these appliances that you are replacing are already too old. Okay, so you are not in this category.
In this category. Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Thank you.
And for the very useful insight from your experience. Maybe we can move to France with Sarah. I don't know, Sarah, if you can share the experience of some of the programs you are doing as part of the French White Certificate Scheme with the Fondation Abbé Pierre. And the same question would be what your lessons learned from that, and if you would start again the programs today, what would you do differently?
Thank you. Yes, we manage a program, as you said, since many years now. I think 2012, which is named Toit d'abord, which means roofs first, we can say. The idea was to create some really social housing for people, very vulnerable people, and to show that we can produce that kind of social housing with a good performance, energy performance. So we create this program in partnership with EDF, which is the biggest electricity provider in France. And so the program is financed at 65% by Abbé Pierre Foundation and 35% by EDF through this white, how do you call it? Sorry, I don't know the name in English. White certificates.
White certificates, yes, or in the ED language, energy efficiency obligation schemes, yes.
Okay, so the idea is to renovate buildings, old buildings that consume a lot of energy, and to rent it to really vulnerable people. We have now we can say that 90% of households that live in that program are under the rate of poverty. So this is a really social program, and we managed to have now we have more or less 5,300 house finished since 2012. So this is a good program because we manage at the same time the necessity to develop some really social housing in some territories where sometimes there is no social housing, but there is some needs, and at the same time the question of energy poverty. So we wanted with this program to show that to public institutions that it was possible to produce some good buildings with that schemes. So what we learned that it's possible when you have a good support for people, because this is people for this program. This is people sometimes that lived in the street, lived in some shelters. So it was really difficult for them to follow the works, for example, in some houses. So we have support for those people. We have some organizations that work to provide good housing, and we show that we learned that the construction of the project is really difficult sometimes, and so it's necessary to have some help with support. So this is the first point, and the second one is that we have to say that since many years now, I think 2 periods, but I'm not sure, we have the only one program on works. It means that all other programs on that schemes are for support for people, if I can say, education to EcoGest.
So you just to clarify, you mean that was the only program that was directly delivering renovation work?
Yeah,
that's what you mean. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Yeah, that's what I mean. So in a way, it shows that it's possible. So that's what it's a good way. It's a good way to say to institutions that we can do it. But in another way, it's sad, if I can say, that the institution doesn't choose to make more program in that way. So maybe the EED could promote the next EED could promote some actions that some programs that connect at the same time performing works, renovation with global work. I mean, isolation, roof, windows, and heating system, and also support for households, because they need to be supported in that transition, and that we can say that there is a question for that of government, of the scheme, how they are managing, but the public institution, and how the all stakeholders can use it in an easy way. And the question of transparency, and of course also what will happen to that kind of program with the increase or decrease of the price of that certificates. That's it, I think.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Maybe a clarification. So you mentioned program. That's one part of the white certificate scheme. So that's a, let's say, a kind of specific part compared to the mainstream for white certificate, which is standardized operation. And what you say is very true, is that these specific programs initially were meant for accompanying measures. So that's why most of them are about targeting the right households, helping the local authorities or the suppliers to spot, let's say, the households the most in needs. And at the same time, most of the works are supported by the other stream, so the standardized operation, where unfortunately we see that clearly there are more single actions, like only roof insulation, for example, and very few deep renovation, even if in the new period there is a kind of bonus for that. So we will see maybe at the end of the year, in a few months, we will have some data on that to see if it has an effect. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Sarah. Now we travel back to Spain with Javier. I guess your experience is a bit different because that's not directly connected to an obligation scheme, but as was discussed before, also alternative measures can help for the member state to meet the new ring fence. So if you can tell us about maybe a few schemes that ECODES did, and the same question, if you had to do it again, what would you do differently?
Yes, well, we carry out since 2013 this program to support vulnerable households, as I said, both with energy advice and with building renovation or home renovation. But the renovation scheme is mainly focused at a home level, which is quite important in the Spanish context. We're talking about a country that has almost 2/3 of their dwellings in multifamily buildings. So it's very different to renovate a home and to renovate a building. It's much more efficient to renovate the whole building, but the time it takes regarding the agreements that have to be carried out and the means that are necessary is much higher. And normally the time schemes and the funding that we work with don't allow us to work on buildings at a whole level. So normally our scheme has been working, as I said, since 2013, and most of our renovations are quite shallow, but help solve urgent needs of several households, not only solving energy efficiency problems, but also solving social problems and solving the sense of neglection that many of these households have through social support and the renovation itself. If there's something that we could change, I think that all of our renovations have had an approximate cost of between 800 and 6,200 euros. So more or less the average would be of about 3,600 euros per home renovated, which basically allows us to change either several of the windows of a home, but normally not all of them, and inject some insulation in the wall cavity, for example, and sometimes change some appliances. As was said before, there is the split incentives issues, which don't allow to or make it more difficult to implement windows and other measures on homes that are being rented. And again, I think that if I could change something for the future, would be to be able to spend more money per home, even though at a home level some sort of deepness can be achieved, at least changing all of the windows, insulating fully the whole cavity of the walls with insulation, so you can improve much better. And then just to go back on something that I would like to change is that we tend to work mainly with homeowners due to the split incentives problems that were pointed out before. And we do think that to solve these split incentives issues, there are two things that are necessary. On the one hand, you need some obligations for the landlords regarding the EPC or the housing conditions, and at the same time, you need some social safeguards for the tenants, so that if the home is renovated and the person that is living inside is in a situation of vulnerability, they cannot be renovicted. That's currently being talked about a lot. to do this, we need basically a decent amount of public funding, because if not, landlords in general are not going to want to renovate homes that they're not going to get any profit from. But at the same time, obligations should be established, or we think that obligations should be established to achieve this. And then just a very small point on some of the schemes. For example, in Spain, it hasn't been passed yet, but we're working, or the ministry is working on the energy saving certificates, which would be applied to the National Energy Efficiency Fund. So that would allow utilities to fund home renovations specifically for vulnerable households, and to apply for those energy saving certificates, so they could manage to fulfill the EED, or the energy efficiency objective. So we think that there are some schemes that are very useful, and that can work towards or around the EED, and that they should, most of them or all of them, should be specifically targeted for vulnerable populations, because we not only achieve higher energy efficiency improvements, as was already established, but we get social and living conditions improvements that go well beyond what we could get from applying these measures to the rest of the households.
Thanks a lot, Javier. I think that all what you said, that's a very indeed important point. And you raised the issue of obligation on landlords that could be related to minimum energy performance standards for buildings, and that's nice. Very nicely make the transition to the very quick last presentation about what's coming on top of the EED as upcoming policies. And I will now hand it over to my colleague Marco, who will provide you a very short insight on that. So Marco, if you want, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jean-Sébastien. So yeah, I'll be talking about the last study we as IECP performed for the European Climate Foundation, and namely we analyzed some policies so in accordance with the Fit for 55 package, namely three. So the ones we analyzed were what would happen if we expanded actually the ETS, so emissions trading system, to the residential sector. In second place, we analyzed the phase out of oil, coal, and gas boilers. And lastly, the introduction of minimum energy performance standards in the residential sector. So before I start, just to go over some assumptions we considered. So the end users we targeted were space heating, space cooling, and so domestic hot water, so the heating of domestic water. We took 2019 as the baseline year. We had elasticities of demand at a national scale, so different for every country. And regarding the increase in final energy consumption and fuel prices, ETS1, ETS2 prices, these we took from previous reports made by the European Commission. And so these are the scenarios we examined so in more detail. First of all, we had a baseline scenario, so where the assumption is that nothing happens, basically no policies are implemented. Then scenario one assumed, as I said before, so the application of an emissions trading system to include also the residential sector and the dwellings. In scenario two, we looked into a mandatory phase out of heating oil, solid fossil fuels, and natural gas boilers in 2035, which means in practice in 2040, as we assumed it would take 5 years to implement this. And heat pumps would replace these boiler systems, and each heat pump would have implementation costs of 10,000 euros for every country we considered. And then scenario three assumed so not only the establishment of minimum energy performance standards in dwellings, but also let's say taking these to a higher level, and so achieving energy class D in 2030. Affecting 75% of all low-income households in each country. And again, the assumptions related to this was that they would include 15,000 euros of renovation costs per dwelling, delivering 40% final energy savings. And thereafter, the same buildings in 2035 would be further upgraded to energy class C, costing this time 10,000 euros per dwelling and delivering additional final energy savings of 10%. And then we had scenario 4, where we combined scenarios 2 and 3, and scenario 5, where we combined all scenarios. So this was actually an update of a previous study we had done for the European Climate Foundation. And in this case, we wanted to verify the results we had previously obtained, which was that, so scenario 3 would present the best, let's say, the biggest reduction in energy expenses and consumption without including scenarios 4 and 5, so with no combination of scenarios. Scenario 1, so the introduction of carbon price actually was seen to damage the low-income households in a lot of cases. And of course, the baseline scenario, so without any policies being implemented, would result in the worst performing one. And also, maybe most importantly, it was found, as previous speakers said, that there is a very vital need for substantial public funding, as low-income groups cannot refurbish or implement any of these policies alone. And so moving on to the results of our study, the updated version, I have put here two graphs. On the left, you can see the evolution of final energy consumption per scenario per country. And you can see that scenario 5, so the dark blue, yields the best results in most of the cases. And just to make this more in practice, so if we choose Romania in this left graph, we can see that in 2050, there would be a reduction of 41% in final energy consumption compared to the baseline year, so 2019. And the same logic can be applied on the graph on the right. So in this case, we look into the energy expenses evolution. Again, we see scenario 5, so the combination of all scenarios yielded the best results, whereas scenario 1 did not yield good results. Again, taking Romania for simplicity, we see that by applying scenario 5, in 2050, there would be a reduction of 16% in expenses compared to 2019, whereas in the case where only an emissions trading system would be applied to the residential sector alone, the expenses would actually increase by almost 40% in Romania specifically. And then going back to the financial aspect, again, we assumed a financing rate of 100% for low-income households. On the left, we can see what would happen if governments sponsored these refurbishments and implementation of policies. And we can see that in almost all policies, all scenarios in all countries, the average income of these low-income groups would actually increase. Whereas on the right, we can see the detrimental effects that it would have to just leave the low-income households to do these changes on their own, as on average, the income would reduce in 2050 compared to today's level in almost all scenarios in all countries. So this was, let's say, these were the findings and the main insights in a nutshell. The previous report is already available. Maybe Jean-Sébastien can put the link after in the chat, whereas the updated version is currently being, let's say, finalized, and it will be available in the upcoming months. Feel free to contact us if you want any more information, and thank you for your attention and time.
Thanks a lot, Marco, and also for keeping this short. I think that was a very useful conclusion for the webinar, also to broaden a bit the scope and see other upcoming debates. I've put already the link to the first study, as you said, in the chat. You can find also in the chat the registration link for our next webinar. So we will be happy to meet you again on the 14th of December, so Wednesday, 14 December at 11 AM to discuss the experience from National Energy Observatory. We have seen today, along all the discussions, that the question of how to define energy poverty, how many households should be considered, how to target them, etc. That's always an essential question, and so we will work on that in in the next webinar. Maybe before we close, I will ask a very final word to all our speaker and panelists. Also, if you want to react on Marco's presentation, or if you have another message you want to highlight as a takeaway, as a conclusion. So let's start maybe with Joanna again, if you want.
No, all I want to say that this was very interesting. It's important to exchange because you learn a lot, and I just want to agree with you that we have to define energy poverty. I mean, to be sure that we are the way that we identify it to be in a way that can work. Marcos discussed about a number of buildings and percentages. I think we have also to identify different categories of energy poverty and make a address to a mix of these categories in a way that will be, at the end effective. I mean, reach the efficiency required and make things working. So this is my last comment. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was very nice exchanging with you.
Thanks a lot, Joanna. So about this point of having maybe different approaches, according to different categories of households, there is a nice experience, I think, from Wallonia, and hopefully in our very last webinar in January, I will try to invite them, and we'll have a presentation from them. Next, Sarah, you're already on, so that's great.
Yeah, just that we are really worried about the ETS2, of course, and the impact on vulnerable people because of the price of the energy, of course, but also because there is a lot of people, as said Javier, that cannot act on the renovation for tenants, for example, but also in some collective property, we can say, collective buildings. So there is 33% of tenants in Europe that will not have the possibility to act on renovation of their buildings. So we have to manage it and to be careful to don't push them in poverty with these measures. We're not sure that the social climate fund will be enough, and the governance will be as good as necessary to give some tools to all member states and to touch vulnerable people. So it will be really important to be careful about that. And I think that it's important to remain that vulnerable people are not the one who are the worst polluters, we say, polluters, and they are mainly the first victim of climate change. So, of course, obligation schemes are a tool to achieve our goals in energy efficiency, but we need some public policies really ambitious. And of course, it has a cost. And for example, the Citizen Convention for the Climate in France ask the government to have 5.8 billion per year for the transition, and for the moment it's just half the budget, half of that. So well, we need more effort to achieve the goals.
Yeah, I think this message is indeed very clear. And Javier, for your final word from your side.
Yes, lastly, very fast. We think that the Social Climate Fund should be applied as soon as possible and with as much funding as possible. The funding that's currently applied and the time that we have is not enough. As we know, building renovation is one of the best ways to improve the energy efficiency, particularly in vulnerable households, and carrying out the policy work, the transposition of policy, and then carrying out the renovations themselves takes a lot of time. Like 1 year, 2 years is maybe not even enough time to carry out the renovations to be able to muffle the effect of ETS2 applying to households. And then, as I said before, obligations for landlords are necessary. We think that MEPs have to be implemented for residential buildings and have to be implemented prioritizing worst performing buildings. It is necessary because if not, as it was said in the beginning, people are going to be left behind because people are not going to be able to renovate their homes and no one is going to force them or help them renovate their homes. We think that we have to work with another parameter, with more parameters to calculate the improvement of energy efficiency. We think that primary energy consumption and even final energy consumption may not be enough to calculate the effective energy efficiency improvement carried out in households that are suffering from hidden energy poverty. Maybe the reduction of the demand for heating or cooling or other parameters could be introduced. And we really want to push the message that we need to decarbonize the heating and cooling system of vulnerable households. If we do not do that, people in vulnerable situations are going to be chained, are going to be tagged with boilers that every time that as time passes, the fuel is going to get more expensive, the maintenance is going to get more expensive, and we cannot do that, especially for the population that is in the worst conditions currently.
No, that's all clear as well. And to conclude this webinar, I will give the word back to Marion, who made the presentation at the beginning, so closing the loop also with the policy debate. So Marion, what would be your final words?
Thanks, Jean-Sébastien. Well, I have two big takeaway messages from this webinar. First of all, thanks everyone for contributing. It was really interesting for me, and what I noted is that the discussion at EU and national level is very similar. So I heard many remarks about how do you identify the target groups, how do you design the right measures for these target groups, how do you calculate savings, and how do you make sure that there is actually an incentive to deliver energy savings among these groups. So that's the first message I would take away, is that I think we're probably at EU level having the right discussion. Now, the second message that I would take away is that we're probably not doing enough. So there is this target in the EED, and it's very welcome from our perspective because we think that it's going to help move programs and gather attentions around this very important topic, but it's not going to be enough. So I think we saw very clearly from the examples that were presented that there is a need for funding, and I'm not going to reiterate what my colleagues just said on the Social Climate Fund, but I think it's a very important discussion there. Yes, this question of decarbonization and getting off fossil fuel is also where we should be looking at. So how do we protect everyone basically from being exposed to this fossil fuel price vulnerability? So that's, I guess, for the future of our energy savings policies. And yeah, thanks a lot for this discussion, and I'm looking forward to participating in more webinars.
Thanks a lot, Marion, and we will conclude with that. Thanks a lot for the ones who stay until the end. We are way above the time limit we set initially, but I think that was very useful. The recordings will be made available. And yes, thanks to all our panelists and speakers, and we will see you next month on Wednesday, 14 December. And with that, I wish you maybe a good lunch, if not done already, and a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.